What do we do when our work is not life-giving? What do we do when it feels far more like toil than joy? What do we do when we wonder if our work matters at all and we just clock in and clock out every day, feeling an increasing sense of disconnect in our work? First things first, I want to say this. This is a reality many of us feel at one time or another. Sometimes it's situational. It will, with time and changing circumstances, pass. But other times it's existential. There is no circumstance to change. It is what it is. And if you're stuck, you're stuck. And the feeling of work being toil can come from a bunch of different areas. Perhaps there are circumstances outside of your work that are difficult, painful, or hard, and the emotional toll is starting to creep into your work life. Perhaps there's an illness, either your own or that of a family member, and the emotional weight and concern of that illness pulls you away from any connection at work. I remember when my brother-in-law was fighting brain cancer and the effect that it had on my work life. I couldn't shut off the emotional stress that it was taking on me, as the weight of that situation was always with me, even at work. Or perhaps it's an external thing like a marriage that feels uncertain, or a relationship with a child or parent or a good friend that is strained or fragmented or perhaps has ended. Sometimes relationships outside of work affect our experience at work. Or maybe it's crippling depression or financial strain or world events or stuff that's happening in your neighborhood. There are any number of things that have nothing to do with our work, and yet they can affect our work and our experience of work in really substantial ways. Or sometimes work is hard because you simply don't enjoy the people with whom you work. You have a boss that's overbearing, micromanages you, or has unrealistic expectations. Or maybe you just find them to be unpleasant and unkind. Maybe you have relationships with colleagues that isn't exactly the way that you'd want it to be or hope. You wonder if you're the person in the office that no one likes, or maybe you just simply don't find a connection with others. Relationships that we have in the workplace matter. And if those relationships are strained, it affects the experience of work. Relationships in the workplace have a very real impact for better and for worse. But also sometimes, I'm sure we've all experienced this, the work itself is life-taking. You don't enjoy it anymore. You don't find it meaningful. Maybe you never found it meaningful. It's boring or tedious. Perhaps you really wish you were doing something else. Work becomes a daily reminder that you're not doing what you really, really love to do. My brother is an accountant in Nashville, Tennessee, and he's grateful to have a good job, and many days he likes it, but many days his work is a reminder that he's no longer doing the work that he loved doing for 9 years as a community developer and missionary in Togo, West Africa. Being an accountant for him is a small daily reminder that the work he used to do that was so meaningful is a continent away, literally across the ocean. And then, on top of all of these normal realities that we experience in life, we have the added disruption and chaos, anxiety and loss of this last year. And for many of us who experienced the winter storm the last couple of weeks, many of us have turned to remote work, and where once we interacted with real human beings in an office, we're now isolated in front of a computer. Anyone else in here tired of Zoom meetings? The pandemic has fundamentally changed work in the 21st century. Add to that the growing social consciousness and awareness to racial injustice, and then we had a contentious election season. All of the pressure points are being triggered, and the events of the last year for many has been the gasoline that's poured on the fire of burnout and disconnect and frustration. Okay, hopefully I've done a sufficient job of identifying the problem, and I even haven't made an exhaustive list. For reasons that are internal to the work itself and sometimes external to the work, our work at times is soul sucking. So what do we do with it? What do we do when our job is burdensome, feels like toil, like quicksand that offers no hope of releasing us anytime soon? I want to suggest a few things that might potentially give us a greater capacity to not only endure these times that are difficult, but potentially get us to a place of greater connection and meaning. The first thing is this, and this might actually not be very helpful at all, but I think it's true. If you find yourself in a winter season of work where work feels like toil, I want you to hear me on this. You are not alone. Most people at some point in their life find that their work is absolute and complete toil. In fact, many people go through their entire life never really enjoying their job. And this isn't entirely a misery loves company type of situation, but it is to say this: we're not alone, and there really is nothing new under the sun. There will be seasons of summer and there will be seasons of winter. And it's not always because we've done something wrong or that the universe or that God is against us. It's that life is just really hard sometimes, which includes our work. I've said it here before in this space, and I'm pretty quick to remind people in any space that I'm in that this conversation about our work being meaningful or our work feeling connected, it is a very recent, and it's a very privileged conversation. For most of human history, life existed of getting enough food and water for the day and not getting eaten by a bear. That was a good day. For most of human history, just getting to the end of the day was enough. So if you find yourself in a long season of toil, remind yourself that you're not alone. Others have gone before you and endured, and they found their way to the other side. And perhaps one of the best things you need to do is to simply be kind to yourself. Release yourself from the expectations that you need to be doing something amazing every day. Sometimes just standing in the paid circle is enough. Sometimes getting through the day is enough. Another thing that can be done in these seasons of toil and these winter seasons of work, I think, is learning to practice gratitude. And I have to confess, this doesn't come easily for me. So this suggestion is far more me preaching to myself as well as I'm preaching to you. Research has shown that gratitude benefits relationships and mental health and physical health. It improves sleep, self-esteem. It enhances empathy. It decreases aggression. People who describe their life with gratitude consistently report higher levels of satisfaction and quality of life. Now, anyone who knows me could tell you I'm naturally a cynic, so being thankful doesn't come easily for me. As Stephen Colbert once said, not only am I a glasses half empty kind of guy, I assume what's left in the glass is mostly backwash. But during a really difficult season of life, my spiritual director told me to write down 3 things for which I'm grateful every morning. And so every morning I woke up and I poured a cup of coffee and I wrote down 3 things that I could identify in that moment that created gratitude in my life. My morning cup of coffee, a wife that laughs at my jokes, kids that I adore, steady paycheck, running water. Sometimes they were serious, sometimes they felt petty, but over time, what I found is that my life became a little bit lighter. Yeah, things were still hard. I hated my job. I found zero fulfillment in my work, but it wasn't the totality of my life. I had things in my life that were hopeful and produced joy and got me by. And without the practice of gratitude, the dark cloud of my work at that time, it was covering and hiding those things in my life for which I actually deeply cared. I just couldn't see anymore. So the simplest and easiest suggestion I want to throw out is this: every day, take a few minutes, even it could just take a minute, and write down 3 things for which you're grateful. They don't have to be big. They don't have to be earth-shattering or profound. They could be as simple as a cup of coffee or a cozy sweater. I promise it will make a difference. Another really simple thing that you could do is spend time reflecting on those parts of your job that you actually enjoy. Perhaps it's a task that doesn't feel terrible. Perhaps there's a part of the daily rhythm of work that is the only solace in your workday. Perhaps it's something that you used to do but are no longer in the practice of doing, but might possibly be able to resurrect. Whatever it is, no matter how small, try to make room to do that one thing for a bit longer. Identify what parts of your work you actually do like and spend a bit more time there. And it might feel like you can't afford the time to do those things, but I promise you, you can. And whatever you might lose in focusing a bit more on something you like will be nothing compared to what you will lose if you continue to feel increasingly frustrated or hopeless or disconnected at work. In the same way, are there people with whom you work that you really enjoy? Find ways to connect with them more each day, even if it's a simple 1 to 2 to 5 minute conversation at the water cooler or a lunch break, or remotely, you'd have to reach out to them and chat with them or get on Zoom. Identify those who bring you life or make you laugh or make coming to work bearable, and spend just a fraction more time with them. I recently asked a friend who what he does when he finds his work or specific task meaningless. I thought this was really helpful. So whenever things are tedious or soul sucking, he imagines those who might find joy at the end of the product of the work in which he's involved. So he might hate putting data in a spreadsheet, but there might be faculty and students who really appreciate that someone has not only compiled the data, but has organized it in a way that's accessible and useful. So while he hates doing that bit of work, imagining those that might benefit from the work makes that work a bit more bearable. It reminded me of it reminded me of volunteering in my children's elementary school when they were young. I loved volunteering. I had the space in my job to do it regularly. I was there weekly. I loved reading with kids. I loved helping out with math. I loved recess. I loved it all. Well, most of it. I despised having to cut out and laminate stuff. Uh, I know teachers need the help. And so there was a part of me that was happy to help, and I never complained about it. I never let it on how much I hated it, but I loathed it. It was miserable. One day while I'm miserable and I'm in the teacher's lounge and I'm cutting out and I'm laminating what feels like thousands of pictures of these people, another teacher comes in and asks me what I'm doing. And I say, oh, just cutting and laminating. And she looks at what I'm cutting out and she says, oh, looks like they're talking about civil rights. And almost immediately I was struck with the image of all of these well-known civil rights leaders covering the walls of my children's classroom as their stories of sacrifice and justice and hope and love are told. And instantly, the work there in the teacher's lounge of cutting and laminating became a gift, a small one, but a gift nonetheless. So maybe in the tedium or boredom or meaninglessness of your work week, imagining those who will be affected or delighted or touched, or whose lives might be made better by your work, might be a helpful posture to hold. These are all really small things, but I think powerful practices to help us get us through those seasons when our work is, in fact, toil. Okay, finally, I want to say this. Sometimes our work as toil, our work being miserable, might actually mean we need to find other work. It's not always easy and it's not always quick, and opening ourselves up to other possibilities can leave us vulnerable and uncertain and with an overwhelming sense of insecurity. But it just might be the case that the current situation or even career isn't sustainable or healthy, and we need to start planning for what might be next. That's a longer conversation than what we have time for, but it is a reality that I think we should hold. So I don't know where you find yourself this evening. I don't know if you currently find yourself in a state of frustration or hopelessness or meaningless in work. But I do want you to know that you're not alone. You're really not. I do want you to know that there are probably small things in your life for which that you're grateful. And the simple practice of identifying them might actually lighten the load. And I know that if we look to the small things in our day-to-day work, bring life and lean into them, even in the smallest ways, we just might find the strength to not simply just get to the next day and do it all over again. It might help us get to the other side of this winter season we find ourselves in, the other side where we discover work as meaningful and hopeful and connected.